Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places people like to listen? How do I make money for my podcast? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great paid sponsors too, so you can get paid a podcast. I personally love Anchor because it is so easy to record and distribute your podcast. People behind the scenes at Anchor get your podcast on all of the distribution services. I simply press record and then press another button, and poof, it's distributed on all platforms. So easy. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. On this episode, we're focusing on the steps to create a memorable and effective infomercial by step 1, a statement of who you are and what you do. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 80 of the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast for January 9th, 2019. My name is Dave Scriven-Young, an attorney from Chicago, Illinois, and I'll be your host. This podcast takes you on a daily journey to discover key principles in the areas of marketing, sales, and leadership for attorneys. So, as I said yesterday, we're going to be continuing through the Attorney's Networking Handbook by Steve Fretzin. Specifically, we're going to talk about what steps he suggests to create an infomercial. And we've all been in a situation where we've had to introduce ourselves, either because we're at a networking event and we're meeting someone face-to-face, or because we're in a bar association committee meeting and we're going around the room introducing ourselves. And it's often, at least for me, a little uncomfortable because usually I'm just winging it. I'm just telling people, what my practice areas are, what law firm I'm at, and I don't never really know if I'm making an impact or not. And so I think this is a really great chapter in this book, because I think it's going to help everyone sort of get organized and create a memorable and effective, he calls it infomercial. Some people call it an elevator pitch. But I just would just call it an introduction. So he talks about 4 steps. So I'll just go through them real quick, and then for each of these next 4 episodes or next 3 episodes, we're going to talk about each of the 4 steps. So he talks about the first step is to include a statement of who you are and what you do. Sounds very simple, but we'll go into why it may not be. Then number 2, describe your prospect's pain points. Number 3, share your differentiator. And number 4, make it easy for the group or individual to take the next step. So, let's talk about the first step, which is to include a statement of who you are and what you do. So, basically, this is just one sentence that basically says what you do and who you are. So an example that he gives would be, I'm an attorney focusing my practice on intellectual property, and I help people protect their trade names and patents. Or you could keep it kind of vague, as he suggests, and say, well, I'm an intellectual property attorney helping people to protect their valuable ideas. That all seems very simple. And as a matter of fact, I think it would be very helpful for somebody who maybe is a very specialized attorney. Somebody who has practiced in one practice area, it's very easy just to say, oh, I do IP, I work in patent law, that sort of thing. But I know that a lot of people, especially people at smaller firms, people who are maybe in more rural type of community, there isn't a lot of focus of a practice. There's no niche practices that are available. You're taking whatever comes in the door, or you're working on multiple things. So in my firm, for example, my firm is mostly known as a construction firm, But, in our particular office in Chicago, we do a lot of other things, including, I guess, typical commercial litigation. We do some employment. We do a little bit of bankruptcy. I have sort of a niche practice in environmental law because that's where I came up from a larger firm. So the question is, for someone like me, someone like you perhaps, who has more general practice, how do you describe in a very succinct, simple way who you are and what you do? So I think, number one, you want to think about, what sort of matters do you handle, or what are the majority of things that you handle, I guess would be a better way to describe it. Are you more of a transactional attorney, or are you more of a litigator? I, tend to break those categories for attorneys. So, for example, even though I do some, corporate transactions on the environmental side, I also do, some contract negotiating as well, and perhaps a little bit of environmental counseling. That's not, I guess, what I would call the bread and butter of my practice. I certainly can do it and have done it in the past, but I would consider myself at the core a litigator, or trial attorney. That's why, I'm in the section of litigation of the ABA. That's where my home is, and that's what I consider sort of who I am as an attorney. So I would start by saying I'm a litigation attorney. And then what are the other sort of things that I do? And I would just add on to that. So what I would say, I guess, as the first statement is, I'm a litigator helping to resolve business disputes and environmental and construction problems. I'm sure there's a more artful way of saying it, but that's where I'm going to land in terms of my first statement, creating a memorable and effective infomercial by telling people who I am and what I do. I'm a litigator helping to resolve business disputes and environmental and construction problems. So for your daily action item, I want you to write down your statement of who you are and what you do, and then we'll go on to the second step tomorrow, which is describing your prospects' pain points. So that's it for now. Don't forget to work on that assignment, and we'll be back here tomorrow. In the meantime, hit me up on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Snapchat, @AttorneyDSY. Send me your introductory note, who you are, what you do. I'd love to see your examples, and I would love to hear your comments on